So I've been a podiatrist for 20 years now. I think I got into it firstly because of, I just did work experience with a physio in Preston actually. And he was the Socceroos physio, Peter Georgilopoulos. I don't know if you know that name, but anyway, this is like 25 years ago, but he had a podiatrist working alongside him and she was doing a nail surgery. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And so I just decided to get into podiatry. So I just went from there. And when I was actually studying it, I wasn't enjoying it much at all. I thought I'd want to teach more than actually do the work. But then I got into private practice and it just goes, gets away from you and you start enjoying it, you start living a lifestyle that requires working. And it's interesting now after 20 years that I feel like I've come full circle and really enjoying the educational side of it again, educating people in a different way for podiatrists. And I think for the first 15 years of that 20 years, I was in a traditional podiatry practice, making my own orthotics, prescribing orthotics, just doing the usual thing that podiatrists are taught. But then through my own experiences of my own feet getting stronger, I started to think there's got to be a different way. And I'd never felt that comfortable with prescribing orthotics. I was really always nervous about it, not fully understanding why you would leave them in place all the time. How I understood the theory behind the way they work, but not really, living it. But I had them, and my wife had them, and my kids had them, and and I made them for a lot of people. And that was all we did. We did a bit of stretching and a bit of strength, but mostly it was just prescribing orthotics. And so, yeah, then through my own journey of looking after my own feet, yoga, strength training, I just thought, wow, my feet are getting stronger. I don't think I need my orthotics anymore. And then it just started, I started doing my own research and just researching more and more. And it just ballooned into this thing that I'm now on practice on my own. I was in a partnership for 19 years and it's the majority of what I do, looking after people's feet or getting people to look after their own feet, really, educating people how to look after their own feet in a way that's not like other podiatrists do. And that has to be made really clear because just because I say it doesn't mean you're going to go to another podiatrist and you're going to hear this. It's just something that I do quite specifically. And there's a few of us around that do it, but it's quite different to the way most podiatrists think. Absolutely. More in tune with osteopaths, physical therapists, and, you guys.
Yep, fantastic. So again, just a bit of a bridging story here. I personally started my own barefoot journey months ago. I did about 6 months. I got myself out of shoes. But I'm fascinated with education. I'm always trying to see what's out there. What information do we have access to, which is, bucket loads in terms of social media. I come across some great practitioners. I actually stumbled across your page, some of the, the barefoot people and those types of stuff. And I thought, what, if this is something that makes a lot of sense, I need to try that for myself and experiment with it. I'll never really roll out advice or things in programs unless I've done them myself. I need to feel it, get used to it. What are the benefits? Understand it before trying to teach that. So we linked up and we've, been back and forwards at a few private mails, and we've actually had a lovely phone conversation previously. And I think what you're doing is exceptional. And I'd really love to dive deeper into, the whole transition from that orthotic period to now, teaching people to understand their feet better. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say you try anything that you're going to roll out to clients first. And Nick, who's the head of the Foot Collective, he says that we're experiment 101, our own bodies. And obviously we're not indicative of how that's going to go across everyone, but we know our own bodies first and foremost. And we're also our own worst enemies. Like, I can give the best advice, but it doesn't mean I always take that advice. And so then I know how that feels as well. Like, if I'm giving the advice and someone else is not doing it, well, I understand that things might not change for them as well, because it didn't change for me when I didn't take my own advice. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, the next question being, like, how has that transition gone? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I remember reading that series of posts that you put up about how you've changed your own practice and your own treatment. So I guess I'm just fascinated with A, how that came about, B, what that actually means, and
how it looks.
How it looks,
So it came about because I just thought, I don't think an orthotic is warranted here, or I think there's a different way of treating this. And I couldn't go down the path that I'd always gone down because I knew better, or I thought I knew better. And so I have old patients coming in that had repeat patients wanting a new pair of orthotics or with a new problem. And that was the huge step to have to say to them. And it was the most nerve-wracking as well to say, I think we could maybe change tack. Maybe you don't need the orthotic. Maybe we can look at strengthening your foot, changing your footwear. You know, often it's about taking more things away, and that's what I've learned as well. But also I'm still learning, like it's still a constant progression for me with every person I see, how I can better explain things and how things work when I do explain them well, or whatever, you know, or when someone implements it this way, and there's, you know, there's constantly getting not caught out, but little hiccups where I've maybe not explained something well, and then someone's gone fully into something that they weren't ready for. And I just I'm always learning about how to pick those marks, you know, as a practitioner. And so I was in a practice that was still doing a lot of orthotic prescription and a lot of just traditional podiatry. And so I had to, I think to really do this properly, I had to get out of there. And so I did, and which is a huge step after 19 years in a business partnership, but it's definitely worth it. It's like only 8 months down the track, and it's not been like the smoothest 8 months in the world or for any business, but I couldn't really look back. It's been fantastic. So then it was about, no, I don't want to say I'm experimenting with patients because I've done the research, but it's still like new for me to be explaining it and understanding how people are going to react to what I suggest to them. So that's what I mean by it's a constant learning process. And then how it actually looks. Well, it's definitely more educational, and definitely as in I'm educating someone how to look after themselves and giving them the tools to do that, and then just acting as a resource from then on. And I think I always felt the responsibility of prescribing an orthotic or having someone come to me to feel better. And I really didn't sit well with that responsibility. I would rather teach people to understand their bodies themselves and learn about it in the process of changing over or recovering from an injury. And then they will be better equipped when something else goes wrong or to deal with things in the future. So that's why I feel, like I said before, I'm more of an educator now, and it's just about getting that message across and learning how to do it a bit better as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's such an exciting space to be in. And, you know, that progressional point is huge because everything that's happening in whatever industry or context, at the end of the day, we're all humans. And if we can teach people actually how to self-manage, how to self-regulate, you know, teach them the tools, that then they can go out and do this type of stuff themselves, rather than dropping back in to see, you know, a practitioner or physio, whoever it might be, in terms of, you know, I need treatment here. So I think it's awesome.
That reliance. I don't think it's healthy. It's not a good way of going forward. And that brings me to the point of health being a business, which is not really that helpful, I think, because health, if it's a business, you want people to come back. And that means you may not be doing all you can to equip them with getting better. I'm not being accusatory or anything. I just think health as a business doesn't work that well. And so I always say I'd rather see 100 people once than 10 people 10 times each, because that way I'm having a bigger effect and, you know, educating people rather than having them reliant upon me.
Absolutely. I think that's massive. It's really cool. And I'm not sure if we got this in the recording earlier, but would you mind explaining to the people while you're sitting on the floor there, Andy?
Because I have to sit in a chair looking after people's feet all day, like for 20 minutes at a time. And so that's non-negotiable. If I'm about to dig someone's ingrown toenail out, I kind of have to be sitting down for their sake as much as my sake. And so the rest of the time I try not to sit as much as possible, because sitting in a chair is not great for our hips, and our hips are like the engine for our body, really, not just our feet. They have a huge effect on our feet, but, you know, for our backs and for the rest of our legs as well. And so if I can choose to sit on the floor, I will sit on the floor. If I have to be at a desk, I'll either kneel or stand at a desk, often balancing on something as well. Just always, I call it engineering your life, engineering your environment, or stacking your life with exercise or movement without even realizing it. I'll feel a heap better having sat on the floor for this 40 minutes or whatever it's going to be. Just physically better than if I sat in a chair the whole time, especially as I've been sitting in a chair on and off all day. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's really, really cool. And, some of these types of methods, whether it's through yourself, through the Foot Collective, through some of the other awesome people out there on social media as well, like this whole system reset, not sitting in a chair all day, getting up, being active, keeping things natural. It's really cool.
It's a mindset. It's about saying, okay, this is what we always do, but is that really the case? Like I'm seeing someone tomorrow who says, I sit from 9 to 5 at my desk. I know that's going to be an issue, and I have to somehow convince him he can do something else. It's fine to say that that's a non-negotiable, but usually it is negotiable. You can usually do something about it if you really want to. And just because it's always what it's been in the last 50 years doesn't mean that's always the way it's got to be. So, yeah, it's really a mindset. The whole thing is a change in mindset.
Absolutely. We need a massive shift, and especially in our current environment. Obviously, we're both in Victoria here and down, and everyone's pretty, stagnant in their movement. And we've got a lot of people in our own client base, coming to us with a lot of pains and symptoms. And, we go through an assessment, and what are you doing during your day? You're sitting in one position. It's been like that for the last 5 months because I'm not actually working. I'm not active. So movement is often always the answer. Yeah.
And I think the World Health Organization, for what we take them for, suggests that it's a sedentary lifestyle if you sit for 6 hours, and 6 hours is very easy to rack up. And, you sit for most meals, you sit when you're commuting, most of us sit at the office, you can rack up 6 hours extraordinarily easily. I would, and that means I have a sedentary life. So I have to do a lot to offset that sedentary life. Yeah. Fantastic. And that's not to say I don't sit on the couch in the evening and just totally relax. Like I just definitely flake out. But when I'm motivated, I make the most of that motivation to maximize things,
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be that difficult. For example, you're sitting on the floor, changing your body position, maneuvering, standing, sitting, walking, it's quite simple this time.
Yeah. And the floor is uncomfortable. So you'll see me move around because I get uncomfortable. And that's the whole point. It means you are not stuck in the one relaxed position.
Fantastic. So I've put together a series of questions, and for our main demographic, we work with a lot of youth soccer players. That's our part of the business.
Yeah.
In terms of our clientele, there's often a lot of injuries in the lower limb. Feet. We look at severs. We look at plantar fasciitis. We look at all of these types of things. So I was wondering, can we dive into some of those topics and gain your experience on that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you want to go through them? Or do you want me to talk generally speaking?
We can go specific. Let's just start with the foot in general.
Yeah.
Let's look at a child's foot. Let's look at day-to-day activity and what you see most in children or young athletes.
Okay. Yeah. So mostly I see concerned parents. That would be the number one thing when the kids are young, because kids don't really get an arch in their foot officially until they're about 6, because they've got still a fatty pad there. And also their limbs are starting out externally rotated, and then when they start to weight there, they go internally rotated, and the timing is all different with so many kids, and so the feet are very reactive to what the limbs are doing, and so parents will say, oh, they're knock-kneed, or the kids are they're toe walking, or they're standing on their, or they're rolled in too much, and so I often see kids in that sense, and a lot of my role then is to be just calming, that there's probably everything is okay. There are obviously some, there's a small percentage of cases that would suggest that we have to do something about it, but mostly just letting it go is, letting it develop naturally is the most important thing to do, and encouraging, like we were saying before, a movement and play rich environment. Don't get your kids sitting like from a very early age. Just be on the floor with them, and just letting them play on the floor, climbing. It's interesting. My son plays soccer. He's 11, and at the end of training one day, there's cricket nets, and they all race. Like one kid climbed to the top of the cricket nets, and then the other kids all saw it and went racing over and climbed to the top of the cricket nets. And the original kid's parents didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. Every other parent said, "Get down off there. You're going to break your leg. You're going to break your leg." I thought, this is like the perfect warm down for a soccer training session, for a football training session, I should say, to be climbing and physically expressing themselves in a non-structured way. Like, you couldn't ask for a better way, but we're so worried about our children. And I think a lot of my role is just to say, just let them be and let them play, and generally healthy movement will come from that. So that's probably the most, like, for young kids that I see. And then, yes, we see severs, although that's a bit politically incorrect to call it that. It's called Calcaneal Apophysitis, or inflammation of the heel growth plate. And that's pretty common, especially in kids, boys 10 to 14 years of age that have doing especially one sport and a lot of it, or not one sport, but a lot of structured sport. Like, you'd have very active kids, maybe less likely to do it, but structured sport where the activity, where the action at that level of the body is quite similar over and over again. It's quite repetitive. So you see that, and mostly it's load. It's caused by overload. And overload with that one activity. So if they were swimming and climbing and doing all different things, it may not happen, but it's with the overload of one activity. And I guess in football, you see that because kids are good at a young age, and then we want them to excel at that. And so then my role is to put a gentle brake on their loads, on their load, and just to manage those loads, strengthen. We used to put a heel lift in, and we still might do that if it's acutely sore, to take the pressure off the growing area, because it's basically a growing pain. And so, yeah, that's a common one that we would see. And I've changed the way I would treat that, because I would probably put a heel lift in less now. Do you want me to explain how a normal shoe? This is my dog chewed shoe.
I'd love to get into shoes, Andy. That's my next question. We can talk for hours on this.
Yeah. So I'll just talk about a calcaneal apophysitis, that growth pain in the heel, and how a shoe might affect that, and how I might have thought in the past it would be better to be in a shoe like this because it's got a higher heel and a lower forefoot. And so that means it's taking load off the calf, and we're worried about the calf pulling on the heel bone where it's sore. And so we used to think a lot of heel is good because it decreases the load. If we think about what a football boot looks like, it's pretty flat, like hardly any drop, if anything at all. Like between the forefoot and the rear foot's pretty much the same. And so if your child is at school in a school shoe, which is pretty much like this, a heel with a lower there, or a runner, just like this, then they are in a shortened position for most of the time, and then they go, and that still is most of the time, even if they're doing 10 hours a week of football in their football boots, the rest of the time is in a shoe like this. So there's still the majority of the time. So they then go from this shortened position to a lengthened position under the stress of running around, and it's no wonder that starts aggravating a growth plate in the heel. And so the way I would look at it now is maybe put a heel lift while they're doing their exercise, but for the rest of the time, when they're just at school, just around, walking to school, just being active, be in a shoe that's zero drop, that's from there to there is flat, like a school shoe. I've got it, just wait a second. A school shoe like this, the light's not great, but it's flat here and here. So that way they're getting length during they're getting length all day, every day, and then they're just getting support when they're putting load through it. Almost like a weightlifter using his weightlifting shoes, like squat lifting shoes for a competition or for when he needs to perform, compared to being flat the rest of the time. A lot of what I talk about is those big chunks of time making the big difference compared to the activity time. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And that lovely shoe you held up there, you don't have any paid endorsements during this interview? No, the other one.
The other one. I do sell Vivo Barefoot, I have to tell you that. I do sell it because I used to send everyone to the only shop in Melbourne that fit them well. That's in Hampton, in Soul Mechanics, when I worked closer to there. But now that I work further away, it's convenient for me to have a fitting range. So I just fit people and they buy them online.
Yeah. So just a quick plug then. Andy's actually selling the best shoes in the world, the Vivo Barefoots. If you don't know what they are, you should definitely look into it. Phenomenal. Dom and I, we've been wearing them for probably close to 2 years now.
Yeah.
And during that self-experimental process, going from Vivos to actual just bare feet, and to, whilst in the warmer months, it was exceptional. And what I've done just recently is I've gone the opposite way just to test and see. I've started wearing, I better leave the brand out, but I've started wearing a runner. One of the cushioned, awesome comfort, new sales pitched sports shoe, and I feel absolutely horrible. It's been 2 months and I have nothing but pain. My hips are killing me, my glutes are acting up. I've had all sorts of issues, so it's just very interesting transferring from one to the other and then back across.
I wore a pair of brogues like you'd wear with a suit to a funeral, and within 20 minutes my heels were killing me, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. That I just spent all day every day in that shoe until a few years ago, and never had any foot pain. And this just shows us how adaptable our bodies are, both ways, for good and for bad. I kind of liken it to, and it's nowhere near as serious, obviously, but an alcoholic or someone that's addicted to something that usually makes us feel bad needs it to make them feel normal. And so our normal doesn't mean it's functional. It doesn't mean it's good for us. It just means it's what our bodies have adapted to. And fortunately, just as easily, they adapt back the other way. And if anything, it happens quite quickly because our bodies know, I think they know the set that they're designed to function. And so they function better in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So that was a couple of the topics.
Did you want to talk about plantar fascia stuff as well?
Yeah, I was just about to say, we've got two other, we deal with a lot of shin splints and plantar fasciitis. So.
But not many kids, I wouldn't see too many children with plantar fascia issues. Well, they might talk about having a sore arch. The plantar fascia is it's not always the plantar fascia. The heel pain or pain in the arch I guess the plantar fascia gets a bad rap. There's a whole lot of other stuff that can be going on as well. It's like, I can get technical as to why I think it happens compared to why we used to think it happens.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we used to think it happens just because of, still most podiatrists would, because the foot collapses too much on the inside and stretches the plantar fascia too much, or stretches the muscle on the inside too much on the sole of the foot, and it attaches to the heel. And often people have a spur there, and the spur is a lot of people have spurs, and that's just where bone lays down extra bone to, because of tractional stress where that fascia might be attaching, or the other tissues there might be attaching as well. And so that's the way we used to think of it. And maybe that is the mechanism of how it gets injured as well. But to some extent, I think I prefer now to think of it as a weakness in the sole of the foot. And then when you load it in a way it's not used to, it is injured. And that's how most injuries occur, when we overload a tissue. And so there are ways to make the tissue stronger by, just like doing bicep curls, but for the feet, exercises for the feet. But I think even more powerfully, it's better to take away the thing that may have exacerbated it in the first place. So that'd be the load. So you might have to back off on your training a little bit, or maybe it's been overloaded because of the shoes you're wearing. And this is probably where I have a leaning towards educating people. When we ideally land on our foot, we kind of land on the middle, on the back here, okay? When you put a shoe with a heel on, you land straight away further on the outside, which is why most people wear their shoes down on the outside corner here. After you've loaded on the heel, you have to get the big toe joint to the ground. And so if we do it barefoot, we do it quite gently, landing in a soft way and without slamming down too quickly. When we do it in a shoe, and you're starting on an angle like this, it comes down really quickly. So there's a huge force going in this direction because of this extra leverage from the heel being this far away off the ground and a corner. So it just goes slam like this. So then some shoes get this extra thick material to counter that. They put something in to stop you rolling in so much. When you roll in so quickly, or if we go back to the way we should do it, when your foot's loaded at the bottom, we should be pushing off straight through and actually rolling out a little bit as we push off. And that works really well if your big toe is straight, okay? So when that happens, your fascia and the stuff on the bottom of your foot work as it's meant to. They functioning as they're made to function, okay? When our foot lands very quickly and slams down, and then the big toe is on a bend like this instead of straight, So you'll see the shoes that I showed you before, they're straight there compared to the bent shoe. So when your big toes push sideways, there is then nothing to stop you staying rolled in, and that's when we see the bottom of the foot being overstretched or overused. So we could change load, we could strengthen the foot, or we could just take away the shoe that caused the problem in the first place, and then the foot should work better. And I think we have to do all three, but if you're only going to change load and if you're only going to strengthen the foot, you're going to at some point have further problems down the path if you keep this in play. And so that's where most podiatrists aren't even thinking about taking this out of play. It's not even a thought in our mind at uni that this is interchangeable with something that is naturally functioning. And so that's where I do things a little bit differently. I think the mechanism of action is the same of causing the problem, but I just go back to what maybe caused it in terms of the shoe rather than just load and strength.
Absolutely, that's pure gold, because
and that's not just plantar fascia. That's any injury, everything. Basically. Yeah,
everything. And again, for the people that will listen to this and tune in, everything's connected. You know, from the ground upwards, your feet are connected all the way up to, you know, in terms of fascial chains to the occipital. Yeah. So everything is interconnected, and if we spend the majority of our time in a certain position or in a certain in a shoe, for example, and these types of shoes for lifelong, then everything you've just explained, Andy, makes so much sense. So, you know, getting out of those shoes, definitely. Strengthening the foot, definitely. Massive. What would you do if we, you know, some people are probably asking, strengthening the foot, what does this mean?
Yeah. So I think I just did a post on Instagram on it yesterday about the most beneficial way to strengthen the foot is just to be barefoot or in a shoe that lets your foot be like it's barefoot. And that means every step, every activity, your foot is having to work and it's getting a functional conditioning basically without you doing some fancy foot exercises. That said, there are many fancy foot exercises that are very specific to certain needs. And so when someone comes to me with an injury, I might prescribe them certain exercises that will strengthen that part of their foot that's injured. But really, I don't think that's where the big changes happen. I think the big changes happen when you are just taking away the thing that causes your foot to be weak in the first place. When we put a cast on a broken arm, when you take that cast off, the skin is withered, the muscles are withered, your arm is is a smaller size than the other one. And so when we put a shoe on that's stiff, like this just flexes here under the big toe, and hardly at all. Our foot has 33 joints. So if we put a stiff shoe across those 33 joints, like putting a cast on your arm, it's obviously not as extreme as a cast, but over time your joints get stiff, and when you have a stiff joint, the muscles that are crossing that joint get weaker as well. And so to undo that, to strengthen your feet, we really want our feet moving, and we want them, and when they're moving well, then the muscles can get stronger. And it depends on how far someone's gone down the path. Like they may be really functioning very poorly, and then we have to do more exercises, and we have to transition them very gently into using their feet because their feet have been so out of use for a long time.
Absolutely. I think, you know, one of the biggest themes of this whole conversation will be just movement in general, you know, setting yourself free, getting, you know, movement in, exploring 33 joints to regain access to. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine not moving your elbow? Well, there's, I think, 2 joints at the elbow. Would that be right? Yeah. Yep. I'm not an expert on the elbow, but imagine, so that's just 2 joints. Imagine if we just fused them, how our arm and how the rest of our body would function. So when we put a fusion or something that's stiff across the foot for 10 hours a day in terms of a shoe, for years on and on, you know, that can't be good for foot function.
Not at all. Just a quick one. We get a lot of questions from parents with a few children, and the oldest child will pass down their shoes and their soccer boots, their football boots. Yeah. Recommendations towards that? Is it don't do it, or is it you know, in terms of foot function, health, safety, that type of stuff? I think with football boots, it's fine to do. I don't think they're a problem. Like I think a football boot is not great for your shoe for your foot in the first place because it's flat, but it's narrow and tight. But we're talking about such small amounts of time compared to the big amounts of time. You know, it's like a tradie who's got steel cap boots and they have to wear them, and there's not really a minimalist shoe out there that's
got steel caps. So I just have to say it's the rest of the time that matters. So in terms of kids being passed down those boots, I think if it fits okay, it's fine because it's not the big amount of time. And the boot is not ever that great for a functioning foot anyway. But it's great for kicking a ball. So I understand, and it's great for traction. So I understand that it's a non-negotiable.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. That was just one question we had from a few parents. So I just wanted to clarify that from the expert.
Yeah. Would you agree?
Look, for a long while, this is going back quite a few years, we said that possibly don't hand your boots down because everyone's foot is different. But now understanding more about the foot and everything you've just said in terms of it's the minimal time spent in that, it's not too detrimental, we believe. But yeah, cool. Good to know.
Yeah, and with the minimalist shoes, they also suggest, the people that make these shoes suggest they're great to hand down because they last really well and they don't change the way the foot functions. And so it's just like putting a glove on. Like if you had a child that was 10 and it was wearing some gloves and then 2 years later his brother's 10, that glove is not going to change the way either of their foot function. And so I think the minimalist shoes are definitely fine to do that. And I think if it was a running shoe or something like that, like a traditional running shoe that had like a lot of wear on the corner or something, you wouldn't want to put that in another kid in that shoe because that might change things. But so a footy boot is mostly worn on soft surfaces that aren't really wearing, so they're not going to start canting their foot in a way that's not normal, you know. So yeah, cool. I think that's okay. Yeah.
Can we dive into the barefoot just a little bit more? And you know, looking at Foot Collective and some of these other awesome guys, what would be some tips for you if you're listening to this for the first time and if you just had a light bulb moment, you know, all right, maybe my shoes aren't the best thing for me. I'm about to start on this new journey to regain access to my feet and functionality. What would be some tips, Andy, if you don't mind?
It's been interesting because of COVID that people have been home and therefore in their bare feet or socks or slippers. And there's been some podiatrists that are kind of cashing in on this, saying you shouldn't be barefoot all the time. Buy these Archie thongs, you know, thongs with arch supports in them. Or I think even one of the big footwear brands here in Melbourne made some Ugg boots with arch support as well, which I found really interesting. So, I mean, we're fortunate here in Melbourne to some extent that we've been able to go barefoot at home for a lot of the time. And some people would be like, how am I ever going to get my other shoes back on? I would say they're a perfect candidate to go straight into minimalist shoes without any issues. Those that have struggled, it probably tells you that your feet aren't that functional and need support because they're so used to having support. And then it's just about transitioning very gently into building up some strength in their feet. Even already their feet are getting stronger. And it's like if you go to the gym for the first time in a month, you're going to pull up sore because you've done something you're not used to. And you might be sore for 2 or 3 days. It doesn't mean you don't go back to the gym again. And so having sore feet because you went barefoot for a while doesn't mean you shouldn't go barefoot. It just means your foot's a bit deconditioned and not used to that amount of movement. And you might need to pare it back and just gently ease into it. And so it's just about being, I don't want to say the common sense. It's about just listening to your body. And I think the whole barefoot thing does give you this great connection with your body because you're constantly getting this feedback from the ground, from how your body feels. And then you're using that feedback as to whether that felt good or that felt bad or I overdid it or I can cope with that. Or last week I couldn't cope with that. This week I can cope with that. Oh, my foot's getting stronger. You know, so I think it's about having that almost intuition and that feedback from your body. And then there are other things you can do to help, like rolling a lacrosse ball, which is a really stiff ball, like a cricket ball, about the size of a tennis ball though. But a golf ball is fine or a cricket ball is fine as well. Using that a few times a day, trying to stack it into your life. Say when you're brushing your teeth, you might be rolling the ball on the sole of your foot, trying to open up those joints, get some blood flowing. Using toe spacers. You've used them, haven't you?
Yeah. I'm waiting for all these cool tools to come out. Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, our foot's meant, if you look at a baby's foot, it's widest from here to here. And then with shoes, we slowly make it like this. Like this is the last of a shoe. That doesn't look anything like a foot should look. So toe spacers are useful to create that space between your toes to try and put the splay back in place, because that splay is really important for function of not just our feet, but our whole body. And so there are tools you can use, but the best tool is just to take your shoes off. Any time spent in shoes is going backwards. But that said, if you've got sore feet, sometimes you have to go back a step, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and so it goes.
Progressive overload. That's it. Like any human physical component, it's all load management. It's really cool. So probably, we'll say maybe 4 years ago now, stepping into learning all this stuff, stepping into teams and clubs. I remember we first bought lacrosse balls and gave them to all of our clients and the teams that we're working with. We said, you guys have to start rolling the bottoms of your feet. And it was almost unheard of. And still today in soccer, in football, people have not paid any attention to their feet. Wow. And for me, it's absurd, because what do you play the game with? Or any athlete uses their feet, but football predominantly is all footwork. So, again, stemming back to that education, using these tools, progressive overload, education, all that stuff. So it's awesome.
And balance as well. Like, so much of football or any sport, even just walking, is a single leg balance followed by another single leg balance, one after the other. And so just working on that has such a great effect on, has such a great transfer to activity. And so just being on one leg a lot is really helpful, I think. Just as in stand at your standing desk on one leg, or balancing on, walking on a single line, just anything that can mimic that, sorry, something just popped up, that mimic that single leg dominance or reliance and ability to balance on one leg. So I think that's a really good transition tool as well, just to be getting better at balancing. And like I said before, spending time on the floor. So setting time aside every day where you spend some time on the floor as a rule. Like, okay, every day when I watch the news, I'm on the floor. Every time I look at Instagram, I'm on the floor. Setting yourself, I'm not saying that they're mine, but I'm just saying they're little rules you can have for yourself so that you make sure your hips are functional. Your functional hips make functional feet. They're a huge part in controlling the feet. And if you're sitting at a desk all day and trying to go to a minimalist shoe, it's going to be a harder grind. It's going to be a lot harder, because your hips will not be as functional as they are if you're standing and moving your hips in different directions.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you can add there between the connectability of the feet and the hip?
We often put the muscles around the foot, give them a great emphasis on how well the foot is controlled. But I think the big movements of the foot, the rolling in and the rolling out and the big changes, and the way we balance come from our torso and our hip and our big leg muscles. And so if you have those healthy hips in place, and a hip is a ball and socket joint, so it doesn't just move back and forward like in a running motion, it goes in all different directions, and that's what a healthy hip is. And so if you have the mobility, so that's why I sit on the floor, because it's working on my hip mobility. If you have the mobility and then you add the strength, then you're going to have hips that can control feet well. There's that good connection, Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, it makes perfect sense. But as I said, our audience is quite broad. And if we're talking to players and parents here, I think it's great to get that,
And there are other podiatrists that will talk like this for sure, but maybe not as, they won't be as, there's not many of us that are so hardcore on the shoes. Like I think it's, if I'm going to deal with someone, they have to be willing to change their shoes. But then a lot of people I deal with are those that are already in minimalist shoes and are having troubles. And so that's when we go to the strengthening components or the hip components or getting better control of their feet. And it doesn't have to be like the most minimalist shoe at all. I just ask that people make a better choice with every footwear buy, basically. And so it might be like 5 shoes away that you get to a minimalist shoe, or you might never get there, or you might just hate going barefoot, and that's okay. But if you just start thinking about your feet being more functional, it's going to have a huge effect on you, even just thinking about it, because then suddenly, like I put that stuff up on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, and people go, oh, I've never thought about my feet so much. And I'm like, oh, job done, like that's all I want people to do, think about their feet, because then they'll have to start looking after them a bit better.
Absolutely. And all of your content, especially all of your most recent stuff, it's absolutely awesome. So once we upload this, I'll be tagging you there, and everyone can check you out on social media.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to purchase any of your lovely shoes and the spaces and that type of stuff, I presume you sell some of that, Andy, as well?
Yeah, I do. Mainly because I can send it out to people, but mainly because when I'm here and I'm suggesting it, it's very handy to have it as opposed to them having to find it, because otherwise it's a step too far for some people and they've got a lot of work to do a lot of the time. And so if I can make that transition easier by having those things ready to go. So yeah. And orthotic just means to change function or to help function. So even though seeing eyeglasses are orthotics of some sort. So I joke that these are the orthotics that I use these days, but they just cost like a small percentage compared to
the big bucks.
of the custom-made orthotic. And orthotic should only be really used in a short. There's maybe a small percentage of people that need it for a long term, but mostly like a neck brace. You don't need it forever. You should only need it while you're going through an injury. So they do have their place. I still prescribe an orthotic here and there for some certain conditions, or for certain sports when they're doing something more active, or certain foot types. But it's not a forever thing in most cases. Like the goal is always to use it as a tool, and then having an exit plan is a good thing.
Awesome. I'm just taking in all this information here.
Well, you know it all, Jacob.
Well, no, not at all. I mean, for me, this is huge as well. So like, I can imagine everybody else that's listening to this it's quite big. It's really, really awesome stuff. And, again, coming through the industry, trying to learn as much as possible, hearing your story and your transition, and you're becoming an educator and you're actually helping people, with the tools. It's not just come back and see me. Here's your orthotic, and you need to see me once a week after that. So, yeah. Yeah,
and the latest research on orthotics and things suggests that an off-the-shelf orthotic is just as effective as a custom-made orthotic, and you can often customize for certain conditions an off-the-shelf orthotic, and so they just don't cost as much, obviously. And the health insurers don't pay back as much either, which I find really interesting. And an orthotic should only, like I said before, be a tool for a short period of time. Yet the health insurers will often pay you for a new orthotic every year, and I find that quite interesting. Like, it doesn't make much sense to me if you look at it from this perspective. Yeah,
right. It's interesting. Change of pace, Andy, and again, because we are recording this, we can edit and chop and change and stuff. It's not a problem. Anything in the industry that you'd like to talk about, whether it's your industry, the industry, life, any information for parents, children? Let's go a bit of a different direction here, and let me pick your brain a bit.
I think we should be discouraging one sport for children until they're like 15. And 15 is at the minimum age, I reckon, that they should be going into one sport. Like, you don't see those people that are great at multiple sports these days, because kids have to be good at their sport from a very young age. Otherwise, they kind of miss the boat. Would you agree?
So it's a long, massive, debatable topic, that early specialisation. And the more that I learn, the less inclined I am to say, yes, you're a central midfielder for football at 9 years of age, and that's all you're going to become. Because
I'm just saying, don't be a footballer, only a footballer.
Correct.
At 9 years of age. And you're talking about being the position already.
Well, our demographic is sub-elite to elite. That's our main niche. And, parents and children, they want to become the next Ronaldo or Messi. So at 9, 10, 11, there's all of this pressure, whether it's parents, school, team selection, coaches, to specialize at such a young age. And look, I think that everything has a diminishing factor. So if we push a kid into a box and say that's all you're going to become, and they miss out on all of these other beautiful things in terms of transfer effect, learning, exploration. I think that
life skills.
I think that becoming a professional soccer player at 11 years of age and trying to become, you're missing out on a world of beautiful stuff. Definitely.
And were you a professional soccer player?
No, so I never made it to anywhere close to what I would have liked. So my backstory was just semi-professional. I played in Canberra at the NPL level. I was injury prone, and
Yeah,
every season I'd have hip flexors, ankles, just all of these niggles that really just got a bit too much frustrating, and I
yeah,
ended up just walking away.
yeah,
And that's what led me to get into, becoming a sports performance coach, is
yeah,
understanding the body. Why was this happening, and how can I prevent this or reduce the likelihood of this happening for other people?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was a really good distance runner from when I was about 12. Um, and when I was like 14, 15, 16, ranked in the top maybe 2 or 3 in Australia. But that doesn't matter because I was 14, 15 or 16. It mattered to me at the time, it mattered to my parents, it mattered to people around me. But I put everything into it. I was still doing my schooling and stuff and did fine at school, but it was my everything. And then when you're 21 and 22 and you can't do it anymore because of injuries or other stuff that happens in your life, like for me, it was like this, oh, what am I going to do with my life? Like and everyone knows you as Andy the runner, or, Jacob the soccer player, or it becomes your identity. So then when it's taken away, when that's all you've ever done, then I think it doesn't create a very balanced human for the long term. Like personally, I then went onto cycling and did really well in that. But then I was just Andy the cyclist. And it was only when I had head injuries from landing on my head, and I couldn't ride anymore, that I had to say, I'm not going to be the athlete anymore. And that's only like 4 years ago. And I had to go to counselling and the whole works to work out who I want to be known as. Like first and foremost, a husband and father. And then secondly, Andy, the good podiatrist, the podiatrist that I trust, someone who's trustworthy. And so, but that was like when I was 37, I started having to deal with this stuff. And so that's why I think to have kids more balanced from the word go, like it gives them other aspects to their life. So that's what I think. I say it from personal experience, and then I also say it from here in the clinic when I see kids and I have to tape them up to get through a game when they're 11 years old. And I'm like, really, they'd be better off just having a week off, but it's not even an option for them to have a week off for them or their parents. Like it's just so important,
Yeah, it is. It's very consuming. And I guess we're all on our own trajectory and we only know what we know.
Yeah.
And everyone believes, well, we can't put everyone in the same box, but a
Yeah.
lot of our clients believe that if I'm not, eat, sleep, breathe football, then
Yeah.
I'm not going to become. And it is a mixture of you. And my opinion
Yeah.
is, across the board, because I have
Yeah.
to analyze everything. But
Yeah.
if you're, restricting yourself to one element, like one type of learning or one type of physical activity, then you're
Yeah.
definitely missing the mark on other areas.
Yeah. And the sport's requested of you as well. Like my son plays football and the best kid in his team's brother is playing for Bulleen or someone at the Veneto club. He plays at quite a high level and is in the Victorian team and he's 13 years of age. But he's going like 4 nights a week. Like that's what is required of him to be at that level. So I understand that if he waits, if he does one sport just for his local club of soccer, of football that he loves, the thing that he really wants to do, but then he maybe plays soccer, plays basketball as well, or just goes and for a hike with his dad every Sunday, and then goes and or goes and climbs trees, or has an active life. He's missing the football boat because he's not in the Victorian team when he's 12, and when he comes up when he's 15 or 16, like he's almost like missed the boat. So the sporting systems are what's at fault here, I think, because then they suggest. They're at fault if I'm right. If I'm right, they might be right and I might be wrong. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're going to miss out if you're not in it when you're 12 or 13. So it's a really tough situation. I understand they've got their hand behind their back, basically, and this kid's best mate had the same opportunities, but his parents said no. It's not worth it, and he hates his parents for it, but he'll get over it. Whether either of them make it, I don't know. Like
it's a hugely debatable topic, and I guess the answer is we don't know. And I do agree with you somewhat that it is the sporting structure perhaps that is at fault, because we look at, and I've had many debates with organizations and football clubs and technical directors about that competition phase. When should a child be in competition? When should we focus on competition? And obviously we've got our FFE, FFA guidelines about the structure and the developmental stages of children and players. But up until 15, we should just be of course, get better, refine
Yeah.
skills. It's always that 10,000 hours deliberate, purposeful practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we can't be little robots. We can't be programmed and restricted and governed. Well, we shouldn't be. We should be free and exploring
Yeah.
and all that stuff as well. Yeah.
And other sports do that for you. Like my son playing football, and then he does that in winter, and then summer he plays basketball. And the skills are so transferable in terms of watching play and reading play. And he's not becoming one-dimensional as an athlete because he's and he's not becoming two-dimensional either. But then he'll go and ride his bike, and we do gymnastic stuff. We just like try and fill our lives with movements. And I think he's probably got a better chance of being a balanced athlete and enjoying sport for the right reasons for the rest of your life. The cream that make it is so few and far between that there's a lot of young lives being wasted and not coming out balanced because of such extreme starts to their life to get the cream. As you know, like injuries are what stopped you. Injuries are probably what stopped me. Injuries stop most people, or mindset, like if they don't have the drive. It's such a huge load on a young person. And so I don't think it's that healthy.
Absolutely.
And I think this is because we don't move as a product, as a function of life. Like in the past, 200 years ago, you're all out in the fields or tending things, and we had to move. And so then it goes back to as far as organised sport, the fact that we have to do an activity to be physically active, as opposed to like an organised activity to be physically active, as opposed to just living to be physically active. And then professionalism on top of that, this is the life we're living. But like I said before, you just have to change your mindset and say, let's take away, maybe you can take away all of that and just go back to moving for the joy of moving, for play. That's the extreme, just to take it all away, not have a competitive environment or competition in the right space, like just wrestling with your mates to see how strong you are, as opposed to having to win, like you're not, like that's the extreme view, the other end of the scale. But I think you have to know that and have that as a bit of a goal to find some happy space in the middle. Because
Absolutely.
obviously team sport and competition has so much going for it as well, but you can go one way too much.
Absolutely. And this is the beautiful thing about discussion with, different mindsets, views, opinions, experiences. And I think it's a beautiful thing to talk about this stuff because, there's obviously two ends of the spectrum. There's in between, what's right, what's wrong, different ways of doing things. On that topic, though, we get a lot of questions from parents about overload. If my son's 12 and he's training 6 days a week and stuff, in terms of professional sport, that skill set and that need, we compare Australia to Europe. In Europe at 12 years of age, they're training 7 days a week, twice a day.
Wow.
That's why they're, these professional people with contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, mostly at the end of that.
Yeah.
The difference between Australia and there is those contact hours. It's the quality of coaching. It's the quality of development. But you don't have to necessarily play another sport. Everything you've said, just get outdoors and moving, do something different in the off season, take up swimming, play with basketball at school, don't play soccer. Just get some of that cross, variability in terms of movement or skill set to.
Is there an off season in football at the moment here in Australia?
There is at the moment because of COVID. The whole season got wiped.
Okay, yeah, of course. But without COVID, is there an off season? Like, is there a time for them to download and do something different?
Yeah, there is. But we'll say 90% of our clients actually continue playing. So they'll either do five-a-side or futsal or work with academies or ourselves, that type of stuff. So it's year round. And again, going back to the organizations that might be at fault, it has to be year round because we don't get enough whilst in season. So it's, hopefully it doesn't go against what you've just said or contradict.
But I guess what your job can be is to make sure they're doing other stuff in terms of what you're programming them to do as well.
Absolutely.
What I see you doing in terms of, like your mindset, from what I understand, is that to get them thinking outside the square, not always going left because that's what you're meant to do.
Absolutely. We do a lot of free play, especially with, athletes, probably up until about 18, I still think such a beautiful coaching area because imagination's still very present. A session where you put out some cones and the child has to make it up, the player has to make that up. So setting people free from their constraints and what we perceive coaching to be, where often it's, go to this cone, do this action, and there's no self-learning. So what we do is try and, build some of that into our sessions, but also like a lot of the strength and conditioning, cross training, in the gym is not specific to the sport. The only way you're specific to your sport is actually doing the sport. All of the movements we do, plyometrics, whether it be footwork, calf work, all of these things to try and build up people and athletes to be better at sport.
Without being, it doesn't always have to be specific, does it? Like it's going to have some crossover effect in some way.
Absolutely. I think that's really cool. So that's some good information. Anything else that's on top of your thought pattern at the moment you'd like to talk about?
That was what you caught me being passionate about that at that moment. I think I also would definitely be like if we're not getting anywhere with a client, I ask them more about their sleep, about their diet, about their other parts of their life. And I think that's where I need to grow and get in there early with those questions, because just asking the question makes them more conscious of it and makes them understand that it's a holistic type of approach. Inflammation is so pain is so much to do with inflammation in the short acute stage. And so if people are in pain and so much of what we eat and sleep is so important. So it is looking at that whole gamut of that lifestyle treatment. So I'm passionate about that as well, definitely.
It's interesting you touched on that, because I had a chat to our head assistant coach, Steph, and she was talking about the importance. She's also a myotherapist. Talking about the importance of external factors with a client. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people, and people have a lot of stuff going on, especially what's happening in the world at the moment. But you can give the best program or the best, set of information or activity. And if they've got external factors that are happening that you don't understand, whether it's sleep, family stuff at home, whatever it might be, it's not going to work. The intervention will not work, because it's just not going to, counteract that.
So I think that's a huge part of it.
Absolutely. And sleep as well. Like if you're not into sleep and for better words, sleep hygiene, then I think you're just missing the mark altogether.
And we can all improve. Like these aren't like good, bad. They're on a continuum. And if you're here, you can always get to here. There's always something you can do a bit better, Like I find that interesting with this COVID stuff. We're not talking about our own health or trying to improve our own health at all. It's all about, wearing a mask or social distancing. Whereas at some point, we're most likely to come in contact with this if we take that on board. So what can you do to better prepare yourself? And this is not just for COVID. It's for any
in general
disease, illness, anything. And it's, like I said, a continuum. None of us are perfect, but we can all improve. And no matter how sick you are, you can still improve. You can make a choice that improves you. And so I think they should be espousing more of that, anyway, that's another story.
It's okay. Look, it was bound to come up. We're very much living in this present moment, but I think it's fascinating that we haven't, we could be receiving so much more information, help, guidance in this time about your own immune system, how to improve it, boost it, all the things we should and could be doing instead of panicking and worrying, because it's very real. And at some point we're all going to be in contact with this, unfortunately. So what can we,
it'd be a great carryover effect, not just for COVID, it's for a whole lot of aspects of your life. But, and that's what a public health message should be about, I think. Anyway.
Imagine seeing on the news, Andy, sleep tips, sleep hygiene, it'd be fantastic.
Do you think it would be foreign? Like, to me, it's so obvious because I'm in that world, and to you as well. But do you think it would be really foreign to a lot of people if that came up on the news, up on Channel 9 News, the latest way to fight COVID, to have a better chance of fighting it? Like, you've got to word it correctly. If and when you come in contact with it, here are 5 things you can do. Do you think most people would be like, wow, blown away that they shouldn't be looking at their phone if they go to sleep? Or do you think it's a common sense thing that you shouldn't be?
I think it is so far from common sense. It's alarming and disturbing.
It's
the 5 most simplest things, sleep, nutrition, hydration, movement. That's four things.
And community is the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. So that's Anyway. But so our job as educators is to tell people about that, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, make them aware of that. Yeah. And so as a podiatrist, which sounds so far away from that, I feel like when you go on a minimalist down that path, it invites all that in more, as opposed to adding, because you're taking stuff away. Nearly all of that is taking things away, like whether you look at diet, sleep, movement. It's mostly taking structured things away that we're used to. It's rather than adding things in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're making me rather jealous. I feel quite bad sitting in a chair here, so I might. I
might have to do more hip mobility work later on, whereas I've done mine already.
yeah, that's all right. I've been pretty active today. It's not too bad.
Yeah, that's right. And so tell me about your shoes. So you're wearing just normal shoes for a while.
So at the moment, and we can talk about brands. So I've got Nike, the Nike Free Run.
Yeah. And they feel bad as well, do they? Because they're like a transition shoe.
Well, they're supposed to be, and they're god awful. And I mean, no disrespect and no turmoil there, but I'm used to them now. So I've given myself that period of time to get back into them. Look, they look good. I always wear Nike. I feel good in them because they look good. But it's taken a long time to get there. So I'm about to do an order of some new Vivos.
Yeah.
I just can't wait for it to get a bit warmer so I can just go back to barefoot, because it's your natural state. It feels
I love seeing you go into the shops and just walking down the street. And you've got to be the right person to do that, because people just look at you like, what are you doing? But I don't really care. And obviously you didn't care either.
No, it's quite interesting. I had a few clients follow suit. We've got probably 10 people now into Vivos and using the toe spreaders and spacers, which is really, really cool. But that transition point of wearing bare feet outside it's even for myself, when I first started, it's a bit weird. Like I felt a little bit judged.
I feel the same. Yeah, definitely.
And people do judge you. They, the automatic.
My wife judges me, so it's really hard.
So look, it was confronting, but for me, this is my leveling up period. Like in terms of I always love finding what's uncomfortable and just exploring that, because we never get better if we stay comfortable. So that was part of it, which is really cool.
I went and tried Hoka's on at the shoe shop. Are you aware of that brand?
No.
Hoka. It's a lot of runners are in it. It's a big maximalist shoe. It's 5 mil drop, I think, so not a big drop, but it's just a big stiff shoe with almost a rocker bottom on it. So your foot is like, I put it on and just walked around the shop, and I could tell immediately my foot is not working at all. And it felt like my foot was foreign to me almost, like it was just taking them out of the play. And so then I hear orthotics are being put in them. And so, which doesn't make any sense, because an orthotic goes this way and the rocker bottom goes this way. So I don't know what you're trying to do with the function of the foot. Basically, you're just stopping it moving at all. So it's not functioning at all, which is going to increase load somewhere else. But it was just even just walking around the shop felt so weird.
Do you know, it's interesting. I never knew any better until I got out of shoes and obviously into the minimalist footwear, but into just the bare feet. And after probably 6 weeks, once my body was used to it, I honestly never felt better. And whether that was, the earthing out and the relaxing or just feeling free, but in terms of connectability, like my body in terms of like generating power, when I was coaching on our soccer pitch and moving around, like I've never felt better or more connected. Going back to shoes, as soon as I started wearing shoes again, I actually rolled my ankle twice.
Wow.
I just lost that sort of, whether it's the feedback, the sensory feedback, or who knows what it was, but I rolled my ankle twice. I've lost what I feel a lot of like spring in my step, although the shoes are sold as springy. It's just crazy stuff.
It's interesting, the whole rolling your ankle thing. My theory behind that is it's got this square edge on it. And even though the Nike Free don't have such a square edge, but you're still this far away from the ground. So your foot doesn't know it's even going over until like it's like it's a lag for going over. Whereas if you're barefoot, your foot is a natural rolling, this natural rolling mechanism. The heel is round, it's a rounded edge. And when you feel like you're going to roll over, well, you never really heel load straight. You don't really jam down on your heels to start with when you're barefoot because it hurts. And so you don't have that huge force going in that direction as soon as ever, really, when you're barefoot. But also it gives you a chance for your body to self-correct, and you move your body over your foot rather than your foot going one way and your body still being in that way, because you don't have that lag. And so I think for the kids playing football, where obviously rolling an ankle is quite a thing, because it's such a change of direction sport. To build up the ability when they're not in football boots to have that adjustability from the core is, I think, like it's something that they should be doing, like they should be in a minimalist shoe the rest of the time. This soccer player I was telling you about, he wears them to school. He wears Vivo school shoes and loves them, and I think that would be good for him because he's so used to being close to the ground.
Absolutely.
And when you're closer to the ground, you're less likely to roll your ankle, basically.
Absolutely. And an interesting thing on ankle sprains with what we've started doing over the last couple of years is actually exploring dangerous positions. We're always strengthening whilst lengthening to obviously better prepare muscles and tendons, but we're actually exploring dangerous positions within the ankle. Getting away from just the standard hopping and landing and proprioception or perturbation. We're now really loading difficult positions.
You can't not load it in a game.
Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Very good. Well, there's been an awesome amount of information there, and I'm thrilled.
Pick everything off your list.
Yeah, I'll just keep picking down. So if you see me, I'm not distracted.
I know.
Just reading the list here so we can cover some stuff. But look, I mean, I was happy to take this conversation wherever it flowed. And I think the most important message is, that movement. Sorry?
Oh, yeah, movement, yeah. And I think that it's okay to be barefoot. I like that to be the message as well.
Yeah.
But movement is key. Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And I think hearing, or getting this message out there as a, practitioner, somebody in the industry that, it's not always about coming to see us and that health, sales point as well. I see a lot of it and it really, really aggravates me and it feels uncomfortable. Dom and I set this business up I'd rather, do a 4-week training program with you and you never have to come back and see us. I'd rather you share that with 5 other people and they never have to come and see us, because it's that education. It's that, ripple effect where we're actually helping people.
Yeah, definitely,
which in turn helps us because we grow through word of mouth anyways. So.
Yeah, that's right, And I see it because I see on Instagram, other podiatrists will start following me and I think, oh, that's interesting. They're local. So I have a look at their page and it's all about what they do. It's all about, if you've got heel pain, we do shockwave therapy. Oh, if you've got this, then this is how we can help you. And it's also a lot about their opening out. It's a very business centric way, whereas I try and keep mine quite educational, and because that's the way I work as well. I want to make it about an education as opposed to, you've got heel pain, you need to come and see me. I'd rather someone go, I've got heel pain. What did he say about how to fix that? Do you know what I mean? So it sounds similar to the way you'd rather have equip someone with how to look after themselves rather than have them reliant upon you to do
it. Absolutely. That's how we make change. And I think that's why you are, in my eyes, Andy, not that I know too many podiatrists, but you're one of the industry leaders as far as I'm concerned, because what you're doing is fantastic. It is. It's really good.
Yeah. And same for you. Like if you're on that mindset, and you've got to be a leader and you've got to be, at the forefront of what's going on to some extent, especially if you have to have the confidence in what you're doing. That's the key. If you're not confident, you're going to hold on to people because you're worried where the next one's going to come from.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that. I look at and again, I'll use my industry and our coaches. I look at that nervous client retention as a fear mechanism, because maybe, you're a little bit scared that you're not going to get more clients, and they try and, maximize all sales and all income with one person, if that makes sense. So it's interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, look, I really, really appreciate your time.
No, it's a pleasure, mate. Thank you.
And I hope that you and I can do some great things in collaboration.
I'd love to. Yeah,
it'd be really cool.
So, it might look that you'd have some, like me, come and talk to some of your staff, not staff, your clients or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think a workshop or seminar, or what I'm envisioning is I'm sort of looking at, we've just built this new coaching program, and we've brought somebody on who does a lot of psychology, brain training, goal setting, cognitive work, psychological work, which is something that Dom and I don't do. So we're trying to level up as a business, but level up in terms of who we can help. And I'd like to put on a bit of a mastermind where we get people like yourself who are specialists in that field who can help contribute to maybe a team of 5 or 6 guest speakers.
Okay.
I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, just stay in touch, obviously.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Have a good night. Thank you.
See you.